Thank you very much, Professor Jörg Rocholl, Mrs. Hathaway, Mr. Scheer, dear guests, good morning to all of you. I'm glad to also see some students here. In my college days, I tended to avoid early morning lectures, and 10 o'clock definitely qualified as a very early morning. Fortunately, our topic is even more stimulating than a double espresso. It's digitalization. And this changes everything. Fortunately, for example, I read that the most attractive job in the US in 2016 is not lawyer or hedge fund manager anymore, it's data scientist. I can imagine that IT students are still not the center of attraction at every party on campus, but they are at many recruiting events. That's because it's hard to think of any business or part of society today that is not in one way or the other affected by the digital transformation. So today's topic fits well. Digitalization, responsible strategies for business and society. I admit, when I first heard that title, I thought that sounded a bit odd, but I came to like the idea of responsibility here. After all, there have been thousands of events already that focus on disruptive strategies. Honestly, has anybody in this room attended any conference lately where the word disruptive was not part of almost every presentation? However, my point is, disruptive and responsible, that's two sides of the same coin. In fact, this building, until 1989, the home of the East German State Council, is a perfect place to underline, if you don't think disruptive about your own organization, someone else might take that responsibility. And we also know many examples of big traditional companies that did not survive a fundamental technological shift in their market. For instance, none of the big steam locomotive manufacturers were in existence when the transition or transformation to diesel or then electric locomotives occurred. At Daimler, we are well aware of this. In fact, our company was founded on a very disruptive idea 130 years ago. It's a remarkable coincidence. The father of Carl Benz, our company's co-founder, was a steam locomotive driver. At that time, people used to say he was in an honorable profession. But due in part to his son's invention of the car back in 1886, he was also in an occupation that no longer had a promising future. So does that mean changing an established industry is a bad thing? No, I don't think so. I'm convinced it's the responsibility of any leader in business or society to make sure that their children can say, our parents had an honorable profession and they kept reinventing it for an even more promising future. So today I'd like to talk about how we face this responsibility with regards to our products and to our corporate culture. Let's begin with products. Just yesterday, I met with Uber boss Travis Kalanick here in Berlin. Some may not consider him the most responsible manager on the planet, but he's definitely helping to drive change in mobility in the digital era. Uber today is considered the world's largest taxi company without owning a single vehicle. I guess that's a perfect definition of disruptive. But instead of considering new approaches like this a threat to our business, we focus on its opportunities. Likewise, we've been pushing autonomous driving, a true game changer that raises a lot interesting questions beyond our own industry, like will roadside motels continue to see a lot of guests if people can sleep in the car while they are going from A to B? Will expensive downtown parking garages still be around if cars park themselves out of town while people shop? Will airlines have a bright future whose business model is based on low-cost domestic flight? Or will people rather use self-driving cars, especially if they have to wait a little longer for a new local airport? We don't... Sorry. We don't know yet, but that process of change has long begun. Our new E-Class, for instance, is capable of partially autonomous driving today. It can be driven that way on all roads, totally autonomous in stop-and-go traffic. It can pass other vehicles automatically. It can be parked via your iPhone while you're outside of the car. It will detect emergency situations automatically and then automatically start braking or steering around the obstacle without intervention of the driver. The next step will be totally autonomous cars. And to me, that is the biggest upgrade to our core product since its invention 130 years ago. The technology works quite reliable today, but still, whether Google or Mercedes, human intervention is currently required every some thousand kilometers, especially when the conditions differ from normal conditions. So one hurdle we still face are the sensors. So whether it's radar or camera or laser, all of these sensors work together on an autonomous car. They work perfectly well and can detect all obstacles and understand them in normal visible situations. But when you're on your way in fog and rain, the human being in most cases still can do a reasonable job. There are sensors so far not. So that is one area where we need further progress. But beyond the sensors, I think it's even more exciting what is happening with the brain of the car, of the autonomous car. And there, the most exciting part of this development is applying deep learning technologies which basically try to copy the functionality of the brain into the car to make it a robot. So in the past, the automatization based on the idea of applying and putting into the memory of the computer all rules which seem to describe the different situations. And you could put in thousands of rules, you still would never cover the entire reality. But now these systems are capable of learning, of getting examples and detecting out of these examples the conclusion which they can apply in a slightly different situation, and it works. So our cars by today can, for instance, detect cars and pedestrians and bicycles and the curb and all of that, and identify it as such, even though the individual objects look totally different, and that works when we develop it in Stuttgart or somewhere else, as well in Beijing or in Berlin or in Washington or wherever. And this is definitely the most exciting part, and that is why in many other areas, but with autonomous driving as well, the speed of development is much faster than we ever have envisioned shortly before. And therefore, I'm totally convinced that within 5 years, we'll have totally autonomous cars being functional, not everywhere in the beginning, but in restricted areas, but soon then everywhere. And that is one more reason why data scientists are so sought after these days. And thinking about what kind of change this will deliver. So far, the car has given us the liberty of freedom of places. We could decide where we want to be and get there in a reasonably short period of time. Now, the time gets longer these days because of so many people liking cars. And that's where the autonomous car now gives us back the most luxury, the most precious good which exists at all, especially for the future, and that is time. So still, many people will like to drive a car under nice conditions out there to the Wannsee or something, but they will not like very much to be stuck in a traffic jam and wait till this dissolves. Now they don't have to wait, they can do whatever they want, not now, but in a few years from now, and read their paper, or look at TV, which probably won't exist much longer either, but have a video conference or whatever they enjoy to do with their time. Perhaps we could join forces with ESMT and in the future offer MBA programs from ESMT while you get driven by your car from A to B. Anyway, here's one thing we are already working on. In the near future, you will no longer have to pick up your car to go, but it will become a car to come. So when you need the car, you just take your smartphone and the car will come, and then you drive or be driven to wherever you want to go. It's very obvious that these very near-term technical opportunities will change mobility dramatically. But it also changed the very foundation of our company. Daimler is in the midst of a fundamental transformation from pure car manufacturer to comprehensive mobility provider. And that's more than just a question of technological progress. It also requires a change in mindset. We are a time-tested company that can make us proud, but it must never make us nostalgic or ignorant. So whether it's car sharing, e-mobility, or autonomous driving, we try to establish an environment that encourages all employees to take a disruptive perspective. I told you there's no presentation without this word anymore, at their own industry over and over again. And this brings me to our second major responsibility as managers, changing our culture. I can best explain how we've dealt with this with an example. With Car2Go, we are the largest provider of free-floating car sharing in the world today. We launched the service in 2008. Since then, many competitors have copied our business model. We gladly accept that as a compliment. Yet, our success was hard to predict. When the idea of Car2Go first came up in a board meeting, let's put it diplomatically, the concept of Mercedes selling while also sharing cars was not exactly met with the greatest enthusiasm, at least not by everybody. Back then, the key question was, can we ever earn money with a new mobility concept such like this? Today, we rightfully ask ourselves, will we be able to earn money without new mobility concepts in the future anymore? The answer is very obvious. That means managers today, and even more so in the future, need one quality. It's a quality you can't study from a textbook. That is pioneering spirit. Or, in other words, you need guts. For example, I was very impressed by the guts that Uber demonstrates. They looked at the established mobility sector and said, let's change this system for the better. It takes that spirit and courage to stand up to doubters and others who focus on regulation instead of innovation, because they fear change. And there's no shortage of that either. But the more interesting part is that they also constantly ask themselves, who else might come up with an innovation that could disrupt our own business at Uber? So they were in existence for about 5 years and were the most, or are the most disruptive power I know of. And they couldn't sleep at night because they thought, who might disrupt us with what? And the answer was very simple, the autonomous car. So if the autonomous car has an Uber-like system, they can't compete anymore. Conclusion, they have to be the first to get the autonomous car. So this kind of basic mindset takes a lot of guts, especially when your own business is doing well, in this case, growing like crazy. It takes also guts to rethink your strategy and business model all the time. Especially Germany seems to have a tendency to rather play it safe sometimes. I mean, there's a reason why the term German angst is known around the world beyond the term made in Germany, which is a good thing, the latter part. Travis Kalanick emphasized yesterday how deeply impressed he was by the refinement of German manufacturing. After visiting one of our Mercedes plants, he said, they are building magic there. I mean, Travis is not always right. For instance, he admitted yesterday as well that he has one car, which is 15 years old, but still a BMW, so he's not always right. But as a result of his success, enterprises such as the one I am CEO of employ entire departments whose job is to minimize risk. And that is a necessary thing. At Daimler alone, we are talking about 280,000 employees who are directly employed by the company, plus the suppliers and so on. Altogether, European auto manufacturers carry responsibility for 12.2 million Europeans who work directly or indirectly in the automotive sector, and nearly as many families, of course, too. Yet, responsibility for them cannot be used to refuse change. In fact, that would be highly irresponsible. If a company or society puts too much emphasis on avoiding risk, it ignores the greatest risk of all, stagnation. We simply cannot afford to lose brilliant ideas, such as Car2Go, to fear, bureaucracy, and complacency. So the key question to all leaders and managers today are these. How do we, on the one hand, minimize avoidable risk and at the same time have the courage and the passion to explore the opportunities of digitalization which are in store for the company in future, which, as a definition of innovation, by nature include risk? How can we continue to building magic and still develop more guts? And most importantly, how do we motivate every employee to follow us down the long road of transformation and change? Our approach to this change of culture and for more risk-taking and agility, we call Leadership 2020. And the approach to that is very different than what we did in the past. Of course, we had many transformation processes, and they had their merits, but typically the majority of the employees sat in their corner and said, well, let's wait, this will go away as well, and then we can continue to do our work. This time it's different. Wherever I go, people ask me, help us for change, because we have the ideas, but this company doesn't allow us to progress fast enough and sufficiently unbureaucratic. And therefore, we took a different approach. We asked via intranet our people who wants to participate in transforming our company into a new future as far as our culture is concerned. And within a few hours, more than 1,000 people applied around the globe, and 144 of them were selected in 8 groups who represented the entire company globally, from gender, from age, from hierarchy in all aspects. And we gave them the task, we are an automotive company, to develop 8 prototypes, 1 in each group, for a new leadership model for the future. And the only constraint we gave them, there is none. They worked first virtually around the globe and then met at different places in the world to come up with these 8 prototypes. Then 2 of each group joined together in one group of 16 who then condensed these 8 prototypes in one. And then we had one workshop, full day with the board, and they presented us a huge amount of great ideas, 8 leadership principles, and then clusters of game changers, which are pretty substantial. And they wondered if we would accept any one of them. We ticked off the 8 leadership principles this very day with slight modifications, and then we named a sponsor for each of these game changer clusters out of the board, and approved 80% of them on this very same day. The result of this approach is mind-boggling for me. It was one of the most exciting days I have experienced. I, for instance, took the mentorship for the cluster swarm organization. And I encouraged my 7 colleagues to each of them commit to apply this system to a significant part of their organization. So we want, in the short term, transform about 20% of our huge 130-year-old company with the principle of swarm organization hierarchy-free, and so on. So we are talking about pretty substantial change, which is driven from bottom up, driven by the people who need it, and now it's our job to sell that to our leaders as well, who might not all of them be enthusiastic by the first day, but they are much more convinced by their colleagues having developed that than by the board. By the way, we were lucky because we didn't know if they, in their prototypes, thought they would still need a board. But obviously, so far, yes. For me, the most important conclusion of this exercise was that there's a broad understanding that never change a winning team, a running system, may be a strategy to avoid trouble with your home computer, but definitely not for a big organization anymore. It's a recipe for disaster for any company, especially when it's running well, and when typically the most significant management mistakes are made when success seems to prove that things are going right. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've made it very clear what responsibility in the digital age means for Daimler and why digitalization is having a tremendous impact on Daimler and our industry as a whole. On products, new mobility services and new business models, and as well on our culture and the way we collaborate, manage and do business. To succeed in this transformation process and to benefit from the opportunities ahead of us, we need courageous, cooperative and visionary people. If you are a data scientist, great. If you are a manager, awesome. And if you are a current ESMT student, hurry up. Finish your studies, even if that means getting up a bit sooner in the morning. And we are looking forward to hearing from you guys and work together with you in the future. Thank you very much.